I'm going to take exactly 1 hour and a half of your time. My watch says it's 4:30 on the dot. If I do my job, you'll walk out of here, get on a bus, and go to dinner. If I don't do my job, we'll be in here, and the bus will leave, and we'll get no dinner. So how many are in favor of Plan A? All right.
Oh, when you put it like that.
No question. Or you can keep going and just leave.
You do that too. And some of you guys will. I know some of you. First and foremost, thank you so much to Rob for having me out here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sherman Ragland. I am a full-time investor, and I just use the word investor consciously. I have a business that I consider part of my investment. I also invest in real estate. And most of what we do today is focused on what I would call the mid-sized deals. For some people in this room, it might be considered a small deal. Small deals for some people might be considered big deals. But basically, we focus on deals that are about $500,000 up to about $10 million. We buy apartments. We have some land development. We've got a 22-acre land development we're doing right now. We recently submitted our proposal to Prince George's County's Department of Housing Community Development. They had a competition last year. We were selected as one of 14 select developers, and we're currently negotiating our first project where the county is going to give us some land in Riverdale, and we're going to build 67 townhouses and single-family houses right off of 295. So we kind of do mid-size. We also do small deals. I was out yesterday looking at a 4-unit building, about 3,000 square foot in Reservoir Hill, to purchase for our own account as a rental. Having said all that, the place that I started is very much where everybody in this room is starting, which is going to a boot camp, learning the business, getting your first deal together, your first series of deals together, and kind of getting your arms around this business. And for those of you who are attending this boot camp, which of course is everybody in this room, you're very, very fortunate. Rob Bostic is not only probably one of the best rehabbers in the country, he is also one of the best teachers, a little known secret. And based on some of the things that I've true, go ahead, give it up for Rob. One of the things that I've been able to do is just kind of sneak in and get a glimpse. And then, of course, I heard Rob present at the D.C. RIA meeting about a month ago, and I didn't know the guy had it in him. I mean, it's phenomenal, the level of information that he's providing. I'm here to talk about one very narrow segment of the business. And it is a very narrow segment of the business that, in my opinion, every investor who plans on having longevity in this business needs to know. And that is the topic of wholesaling deals. Some of you may know this particular area of the business by its former name, also known as flipping. Flipping is not a word that we use in the state of Maryland. It just so happens that, amongst many other things, I don't talk about it a lot because it's more of a personal thing, but I decided many years ago that I wanted to go to law school. And for many years, it was very challenging for me to do that, especially when you have 3 children, to just simply up and say, hey, I'm going to go to law school. But a couple years ago, I found an actual online program that's Concord University, which is owned by Kaplan. Kaplan, of course, owns not owns, but is a subsidiary of the Washington Post, same folks that do the prep stuff. They actually have the world's first online law school. They have very talented professionals, law school professors who teach it. And I decided to go ahead and start doing law school. So I'm in a 6-year law school program where every 2 or 3 days a week, I actually go down to the basement, close the door, go on my computer and watch lectures and do exams and papers and stuff. But I actually took a course in contracts, and to my surprise, I did not know this, but I've been in business for 15 years and did not know this. When I took my first contracts class, I actually learned that you can, by right, assign a contract. There is nothing inherently illegal about assigning a contract. Now, the person that you're doing business with can, in fact, say, no, I will not allow you to assign this contract. And, of course, if they do that, then you're not supposed to do it. But there's absolutely nothing inherently illegal or wrong or morally or ethically wrong with assigning a contract. In fact, it is your right as a party to a contract, unless the contract says otherwise, you can freely assign it to anybody that you want. And I never knew that. I never knew that till about 6 months ago. And so
It
this
didn't
whole...
stop you.
Huh?
It didn't stop you before, though.
Well, yeah, ignorance is bliss. But the
If it's assigned to you, can you still assign to somebody else during that process?
by definition, if you enter into a contract with another party and there is no language within the contract that says it's not assignable, one of your rights as a participant or a party to the contract is you have the right to assign it, and nobody can stop you. But I say that as kind of a globally, what is this whole concept of flipping? Flipping in its original form up until May of 2002 basically meant if you had a property under contract, you could freely, willfully, however you want, assign your interest to somebody else. And rather than you going forward with the terms and conditions of the contract, you basically took your position and gave it to somebody else, and that other person could go ahead and step in your shoes. And that's what the original concept of flipping was. However, along the way, some people learned how to do business in a less than ethical manner, and it got tagged with the label flipping. So when people talk about flipping today, the US Department of Housing and Urban Development actually issued this release. I said 2002, I'm sorry, it's actually 2003. They actually issued this. Anybody know what the Federal Register is? Okay, the Federal Register is actually anytime a new law comes out, they put it in the Federal Register, either a new law or a new interpretation of the law or a new executive order. Whenever it comes out by law, they have to put it in the Federal Register and people have a period of time to comment on it. This was actually the final ruling by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And see the title, see what it's called? It is called the Prohibition of Property Flipping and HUD Single Family Insurance Program. And if you go on to actually read what that law is, it actually goes on to say that this is the final rule addresses property flipping, and then goes on to give its own working definition as to what flipping means. It is the practice whereby a property recently acquired is resold for considerable profit. Well, that doesn't sound so bad, does it? Keep reading. Considerable profit with an artificially inflated value. First key word, artificially inflated value. Often abetted, well, that doesn't sound like a good word, by a lender's collusion. Well, we know collusion is not a good word. With the appraiser. Okay? Now, quite honestly, this is still kind of vague. So they go on and say, specifically, the final rule establishes certain new requirements regarding the eligibility of properties to be financed with federal housing insurance, yada, 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 and all the reasons why. Basic bottom line is this. Here we go. As noted, property flipping involves the rapid resale, often within days, of a recently acquired property. Accordingly, HUD proposed to prohibit. Now, if you actually go on and read the rest of the language, it really goes on to spell out what it's really talking about, which is anytime an entrepreneur buys a property, does nothing to it, turns around and resells it to a homeowner at an inflated price and uses basically a bogus appraisal that says this house is worth way more than it's really worth, and then that homeowner turns around and uses an FHA, federally insured mortgage, to purchase that property. And the only way that can be done is if somebody is in collusion, whereby you have an appraisal. House is worth in the open market, if it was fixed up, the after repair value might be $100,000. However, that property needs $30,000 worth of work. Quickly, what would you pay for it? 70. I wouldn't. There's no profit in that. 40. Okay? And you say 40, you say 38, and you say 42. And at the end of the day, we kind of established that amongst the investor community, that property is worth $40,000, right? Because you're buying it with the understanding that, hey, A, you're going to put $30,000 to fix it up, and B, you want to make a profit for what you did, right? But rather than fixing it up and then reselling it, the person will automatically go ahead and resell it. So they paid 40, okay, which means that's what it's really worth. They resell it at 100, okay, which is what the other houses that are fixed up are worth. And then they get an appraiser to basically put forward a bogus appraisal that says the house is worth 100, knowing full well it has all these issues with it, all these problems, and it still needs $30,000 worth of work. And the only way that transaction would go forward is if you have a bogus appraisal that says, yep, That's what it's worth. And then a lender who also is in collusion to go ahead and support that, okay? That, ladies and gentlemen, is clearly wrong. The main reason why it's wrong is because the only way that that transaction would go forward is if there's fraud. Somebody signing off an appraisal that says it's worth a certain amount when it's not, and somebody putting forth making a loan knowing full well the property's not worth that much. That is fraud. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is flipping. Unfortunately, that category of flipping now has a label on it. And that label spills over into the type of flipping I was talking about before, which is different. If I put a property under contract, same property we're talking about, and I put it under contract for 38, but you think it's worth 40, and you really want it, what's wrong with me flipping you my contract and taking $2,000? Yeah, exactly. And that is a reasonable business transaction, and there's nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for you to go into your bank today and say, okay, I'm in the business of rehabbing houses, and every once in a while I also flip them. So, hopefully, everybody understands the difference now between Category A, which I talked about, which is getting something under contract and assigning your contract, and Category B, which is where you've got fraud and collusion. Two very different types of things. But I would caution you, and I would suggest to you that you eliminate the word flipping from your vocabulary, because you will spend more time and energy trying to explain to somebody what you're talking about. So what I'm here to talk about today is wholesaling houses. And just in case somebody says to me, oh, Sherman, you're being way too literal on this thing, you know? You got to give yourself some latitude. This is what the Attorney General in Maryland is sending out to everybody. You know, nice big red bold. And it even goes on to give these examples. In February, the flipper bought the house for $24,000. And then they sold it to you in July for $78,000. The problem is, nowhere in here does it say anything about, well, what happened in between. You know, what if you were one of Rob Bostic's proteges, took this boot camp, figured out how to make this thing work, and actually put $30,000 into fixing that house up?
Also, doesn't the reg say 6 months? Couldn't that have been August?
Could have been, but I mean, this actually went out before HUD issued its final ruling. This actual brochure I downloaded PDF form from the Attorney General's office in Maryland. Was done in October '01. So this actually predated the HUD ruling. But the flipping thing, the bad flipping, the B category flipping became so bad in Baltimore that they were actually sending these out to homeowners and prospective home purchasers. And so the very day you slip up and talk about wholesaling and call it flipping and go to talk to your banker or family members, this will be the day that they get this in the mail, right? You got to explain what you're talking about. So nevertheless, that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is wholesaling deals. In other words, you come across an opportunity, you're doing all the things that Rob has taught you, such as your marketing, your analysis, you've determined that it's a good deal, but for one reason or another you decide that you're not going to move forward with the transaction. You're going to turn around and assign your interest to another investor and take a quick fee. That's what we're talking about. That's wholesaling. Now, can anybody in this room tell me, for the life of me, if in fact you have a transaction, let's say that you do your analysis and you do it the way that Rob has taught you, and you get on the phone with Rob and get some mentoring and you piece your first deal together, and you're looking at a potential profit, if you do everything correctly, of $40,000 off of your rehab. And yet, as you talk amongst your friends in the different RIAs, and you kind of get an understanding of this the whole difference between, bird dogging versus wholesaling versus rehabbing, and you're not quite sure how it all works together, but you do know this: bird dogs make $1,000 on a transaction, and wholesalers make about $5,000 on a transaction, and rehabbers make about $30,000, and you automatically say, well, I want the 30, right? No? Yeah. So here are we. So the question would obviously come up, if it's the same transaction, right? The same piece of property, and on one side of the transaction, as a rehabber, you can make $30,000 or $40,000. And on the other side of the transaction, as the wholesaler, you're only looking at maybe a $5,000. Why in the world would you want to wholesale it? All right? Why? Quick in and out. Quick cash. Quick cash. When you are a rehabber, who takes the risk? You do. The business of rehabbing, just like any other business, is a business of managing risk. That's why you come to a boot camp, right? You come to a boot camp to learn how to manage risk, right? The reason why you are going to continue to take advantage of the mentoring that Rob's going to provide you is because you want to manage your risk, right? When you're wholesaling a deal, what's the risk? Earnest money deposit. The way that you wholesale a deal is very, very similar to the way that you would put together a rehab deal. Rob's talked to you about putting out offers and having a marketing machine going, right? You guys have talked about that? Okay, and at a certain point you have to put a contract out to buy the property. He's talked about that? Okay. And then at a certain point you have to put up something called earnest money. Okay. And if you walk away from the deal, what happens? You lose your earnest money. Okay. So up until that point, you've pretty much done everything that a wholesaler does. You do your marketing, you find deals, you do your analysis, you put the deal under contract. The basic difference now at this point between being a wholesaler and being a rehabber is the rehabber takes it all the way through. And you go ahead and actually rehab the property and then sell it. A wholesaler at that point would do exactly the same things. Do the marketing, get the deals coming in, do your analysis, determine whether it's a good deal or not, put it under contract. But at that point, for whatever reason, a wholesaler may very well say, you know what, I'm not going to take it all the way through the transaction. At this point, I'm just simply going to assign my interest to somebody else and take a quick fee, as Steve said. And if the deal falls apart, what will they lose? Their earnest money deposit. And that's a business decision that you would then make. And I know some people get like, oh, if I don't go forward with the deal, my reputation will be dirt in this town. Nobody will call me back. I got news for you folks. There's 40,000 real estate agents in the MLS system, okay? You're lucky if they remember your name on the transaction you're working on, okay? And if you ever come up to a business decision that says, you know what, I'm just going to walk away from the earnest money, you make a business decision. You put a deal together, it looks real good on paper, you do everything you think is right, you put up your $1,000, okay? And then at a certain point, for whatever reason, you can't go forward. Now, it probably would make sense to get on the phone and start talking to the agent. But if the agent says to you, look, if you don't come to settlement on such and such a date, we're going to keep your $1,000. It's a business decision that you make. And you shouldn't get all emotional and caught up about it. Okay? Now, having said that, if you put something under contract, you should be ready to go forward with it. That is generally speaking, a good idea. That is a very good idea. But again, getting back to the point, why would somebody want to wholesale a deal versus going ahead and doing the rehabbing when the profits are so much bigger in the rehabbing? Why would somebody want to do that? One is you want to take the quick cash. What else?
They don't want to deal with contractors.
I'm sorry?
They don't want to deal with contractors.
You may not want to deal with contractors.
He doesn't have the money to put down to buy a house.
Well, if you don't have the money to put down for a house, you probably shouldn't be in the wholesaling business. Because at that point, what you're saying is, I really didn't have the money to do the deal. Okay, and therefore I put forth a contract knowing full well I couldn't execute it. That's a different scenario than what I talked about before about making a business decision to walk away and lose your $1,000. Okay, you should never put anything under contract using using proof of funds unless you are prepared to move forward on the deal. So how do you deal with that? Because I see some people scrunching up their faces. What if you think that's a good deal, but you don't have the money to put up? What do? You find a partner. You use somebody else's money, and it's clearly understood with that other person. Hey, if we get this deal, we need to be prepared to move forward. The other way you do it is you wind up becoming a bird dog. And that is really the classical definition and the distinction between being a bird dog and being a wholesaler. A wholesaler will actually put something under contract. They will actually put money at risk. They'll actually put up the $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 earnest money deposit check and put up the proof of funds and put it under contract. Anytime you put something under contract, you should be prepared to move forward on the contract. That I will say. If you're not prepared to put it under contract, or you're not prepared to move forward on the contract, then what you do is you automatically default yourself into the position of bird dog, which is, hey, I know how to find good deals, I know where the good deals are, but I may not necessarily have the financial wherewithal or the partners or the other things to be able to actually put it under contract and put $1,000 at risk, and that's okay. I saw that there was a one-pager going around, everybody's putting their name and address on it. Okay, well, by definition, everybody in this room for the past 3 days is interested in this business, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? So guess what's a good list if you happen to have a deal that you want to wholesale or you want a bird dog for somebody? That's a good place to start. And so if you find a deal and you think it's a deal but you're not quite sure, but you don't have the financial resources to put up the earnest money deposit and you don't have the financial resources to put up the proof of funds, then go around the list and say, hey, I think I got a deal. Is anybody interested? And all I'm looking for is a $500 or $1,000 fee for bringing it to your attention. And that's zero risk. Zero risk. The only thing involved there is your time and energy to kind of flush it out and make sure it's really a deal. So those are some of the reasons why somebody might not choose to be a rehabber, but still go through the same exercise and at a certain point say, hey, let me go ahead and wholesale my deal to somebody else. Let me give you a couple of other reasons why you might want to be a wholesaler. Number one, which I think is probably a good one, if you do everything that Rob teaches you to do, especially on the marketing side, you're going to have more deals than you know what to do with. I mean, I know that to some of you who haven't done your first deal, you're sitting there going, come on, Sherman, quit lying to me. There's no way. I have more deals than I can deal with. Rob, how many deals did you do last year?
Last year?
Yeah.
Probably
42. So that's what, about 3.5 a month, 4 a month?
like that.
Did you look at more than 4 deals that were pretty decent
Oh, yeah.
on a monthly basis?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is there's a whole lot of people that talk about doing 100 houses. I think I've only met one person in my life that actually, maybe a couple, that did 100 houses. And I think they did it 1 year and then they said, my head was about ready to pop off and spin around the floor like The Exorcist. I mean, there's just so many transactions you can do during the course of a year. There's only so many transactions you can do during the course of a month. And the reality is, quite honestly, and Rob I'm sure has already talked about it, rather than fretting about doing more and more and more deals, focus on getting bigger profits out of the deals that you do. You know, instead of being satisfied with, you know, obviously the first thing you want to do is get your first deal done, but instead of being satisfied with, you know, $20,000 profit per rehab, why not get $40,000 per rehab, or $60,000 profit per rehab, or $100,000 profit per rehab? I tell you, I mean, I'd rather have 2 rehabs a year that I made $100,000 off of, quite honestly, all things being equal, right, than a comparable number of smaller deals that I only got $10,000. If I only got $10,000, what am I doing? 20 deals? You know, so work on the business part, get better at what you do to the point that your profit margins increase. And if you do that, I guarantee you, if you do some of the things that Rob teaches you from the marketing standpoint, you will have way more deals than you can handle during a given month. So then you're faced with 2 choices. Do I simply walk away from that deal, particularly a deal that was generated by my own marketing efforts, or do I wholesale it to somebody else and take a $5,000 or $10,000 profit? So one of the reasons to wholesale deals, quite honestly, is it creates a new profit center. If you are doing very well in the rehab side of the business and your marketing machine is kicking up and you're getting a lot of business going across your door, going through your door, then wholesaling is just a natural extension of your business. It's another profit center. And what you do is you become very, very good at certain types of houses or certain parts of town, but people are bringing you deals from all over, or your marketing efforts are bringing you deals from all over. And you simply say, you know what? I love Northern Virginia. It's a nice place to drive through, but I'm not interested in being an investor there. So if any deal comes across that's over on the other side of Potomac, I'm going to wholesale it to somebody else. Or I've really loved Baltimore. Baltimore's been very good to me, but now I want to migrate to a different part of town. Now I want to go down to Montgomery County or something like that. And so therefore, all those deals I used to get in Baltimore, I'm not going to wholesale them to somebody else. It's another profit center. Other reasons why you should consider wholesaling. Go back to the original one about the quick cash. Even if you have a fairly predictable, stable income source coming in through your rehabbing efforts, every once in a while you may want to do something special. Valentine's Day is coming up. 3 weeks. Maybe you want to go on a cruise. You need a quick $5,000, right? you look at your wife and you say, hey, honey, rather than just simply going up to Shea whatever for dinner, let's just go on a 10-day cruise. Wholesale a deal. Just wholesale a deal. See, Rob, I really like what Rob said when he spoke to the DC Club. He said he comes, actually no, it was on the radio show we were talking. We were talking about on the radio show. And Rob said, I asked Rob the question, why are you teaching people what you know? And I said, aren't you afraid about competition? And he gave the most perfect answer anybody could give, which was, if I came from a position of scarcity, meaning there's only 10 deals out there this month and there's 100 investors fighting over them, then maybe I might not be willing to share. But the reality is there's way more deals than any 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 investors could deal with. And so if you have the deal of a century come across your lap, and you're looking at a possibility of a $50,000 rehab profit, or you say, hey, if I just go ahead and wholesale this one to somebody else, maybe, this month I can give my wife an extra special birthday present. Or a situation that we were faced with, a real situation we were faced with last year, where my mother-in-law, who my wife's originally from the UK, and my mother-in-law is a British citizen, was having some heart problems. And so she went to see the doctors in the UK. UK has socialized medicine like Canada. And the doctor said, well, there's really nothing we can do because you're 62 years old. Well, what kind of answer is that? And what they were really saying to her was, the way our medical system works is you could have had a pacemaker put in, but you're too old for it because your life expectancy is only X number more years. So we're not going to waste the government's money putting a pacemaker. So, you're shocked? Yeah. Hey, living in America. Right? So my wife and I put my mother-in-law on a plane, and we flew her here. And we took her up to the Washington Medical Center, which probably has the best cardiology program on the East Coast. And the doctor said, you are the perfect candidate for this procedure, but we need to get it done within the next 30 days. We don't want to wait too much longer. And so with that, we told her to stay here, but she insisted on going back home to tie up some loose ends, And so she went home, then we flew her back over here, and she had the heart procedure, and she stayed with us for a month. And that was it. It cost us $20,000, $30,000, I think it was. $20,000, $30,000. The price tag was actually more than that, but we explained her situation to the hospital, and God smiled on us. And originally they told us it was $80,000, and then they called us back 2 days later and said, no, looks like it's going to be. The doctors got together and said they want to do this, and worked out some things. So now the price went from 80 down to 60 in 48 hours. And then they called us back and said, I think it was $30,000, $20,000 or $30,000. It was somewhere in that price range. But point being is, what happens when life is going along and you say, okay, I got X amount of money coming in and I'm putting it into certain investments and certain things, and all of a sudden this unexpected expense comes your way. Not an unexpected, I want to go out and buy a new toy. But an unexpected, hey, mom needs a heart procedure and she can't get it where she is and she doesn't have any medical insurance. Or the medical insurance she had was government insurance in this particular case. And you got to come up with a quick $20,000, $30,000. And so you may very well be out there saying, well, it makes sense for me to rehab, but the doctors didn't want to hear. There was one condition. They did drop the price down, but they said, bring the cashier's check with you when you come in for the procedure. No. So, No. So, right. So this was one of those instances, where I couldn't walk in and say, well, look, I got this house in the rehab, and I got I got a buyer in the wings, and why don't I just go ahead and assign you? No. They wanted a cashier's check. It was very specific, cashier's check, not just check. And so life happens where you just gotta, hey, I gotta come up with $20,000 next month, no matter what, and it's not like, hey, I can just wait till some things get done. So that's another example as to why you might want to get involved in wholesaling. So any questions so far on anything? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a certain fee that is common for you to get when you sell a property?
That's a really good question, and I am going to answer that, but I'm not going to answer it right now. I want to go through a couple of examples, and then I want to show you, tell you what my personal opinion is about what the fee structure should be. Any other questions about anything I've said so far? Is everybody still with me? Are we understanding what this wholesaling? Okay, yes, ma'am.
When you do wholesale a deal, is there any kind of documentation requirement, I don't know if it's a requirement, that expectation that the person purchasing the deal from you should really anticipate getting?
Yes. And your question is just like, is Michelle, right? Michelle's question. I'm going to actually take you through a case study and answer that for you. It's a very good question. What I'm handing out right now is a case study. I do actually have a transaction I want to walk you guys through, but I want to make sure, if nothing else, when I walk out of this room, that everybody has a very crystal clear understanding about this whole concept called wholesaling. So I'm passing out, hopefully I got enough copies, I still have some more. This is a little case study that I wrote up specifically to teach this concept called wholesaling. It's still going around? I actually have it on the overhead, so I'm going to actually read it. Now I see we have, okay, everybody's in groups of, we got 4 and 5?
4 and 6.
4 and 6. 4 and 6. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read this to you guys, and that's going to take me all of about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we're going to break up into groups. And I want the 4s on this side to work as a group. And then I want 3s and 3s on this side to work in a group. And I see we got 5 here, so 3 and 2 is okay, 3 and 2 is okay. But I want you to get together amongst yourselves and answer some of the questions I'm going to ask as I go through this case. Okay? So everybody with me? Everybody get a copy? Okay. So let's go ahead and read it. 15 years had passed since you had last seen your school classmate, Bob the village idiot. So as it came as a strange request when he phoned to ask you to catch a flight to St. Thomas for President's Weekend at his expense. A 3-day excursion with your spouse and children to stay at David's Island, a private island of 50 residences 3 miles off the coast of St. Thomas, and internationally known as a second home to some of the wealthiest people on the planet. On the flight down, you had much anticipation. What could Bob possibly want to discuss that was so urgent that he was willing to pay for all of your expenses and offer you $10,000 to simply come and help him out of a jam? Although it had been 15 years, you had recalled that, that Bob was incredibly bright. He seemed to know everything about everything, was a little hard-headed, and was written off by most of the professors at school as unteachable. So it was quite surprising that he would be calling you asking for help. Regardless of whatever it was that Bob could possibly want, you knew that at the very least, it would be a wonderful break for you and your family from the 80-hour weeks at work. Anybody ever have an 80-hour week at work? Which was getting old. You thought the way to wealth was by doing well in school, making good grades, and then landing a great job. Ha ha. That's what your mom and dad had always said. And it was good enough to get them squarely in the middle class. However, 15 years after B school, working hard as a business strategy consultant and being in the hunt to make partner at the prestigious Dewey, Cheatham & Howe, had been wonderful for the ego, but it was doing very little for your pocketbook. And even worse, by the way, if anybody's taking notes at this point, you don't have to take notes. I'll tell you when you need to take notes. And even worse, things to your marriage. No matter how much you made, the demands associated with the job required you to continuously keep up with the Joneses, and the treadmill of life was wearing thin. If nothing else, having a paid vacation, regardless of what help Bob needed, would be a welcome relief. Bob wasted no time in explaining the situation. It seems that back in the 20s, 24 wealthy families had come together to create a special place where they could spend their summer months, completely isolated from the hustle and bustle of their duties on Wall Street in Washington and in Chicago. Since most had made some, if not all, of their fortunes in real estate, it was natural that they would form a partnership to buy one of the finest pieces of real estate in the entire world, David's Island, located just 3 miles off the coast of St. Thomas. The island was truly paradise. In addition to building private residences, each with its own private beach, the founding families had decided to create some common areas on the island for communal activities, including a private shared harbor for each family's yachet, a private library, and a small town hall which included a modest but well-apportioned clubhouse, tennis courts, and the island's only bar restaurant, fondly described as the Tea Shop. In time, 26 other families were allowed in. Bob went on to share that his family was not one of the original 24 wealthy families who founded the island. Rather, his father and mother had grown up dirt poor on the island of St. Thomas. But his dad had the good fortune of growing up street smart with a passion to succeed. Early in life, he learned that success leaves clues, and he befriended a captain who owned a small yacht company who would lease his yachts to wealthy individuals who wanted to spend their summers in the Caribbean, one of whom was a descendant of one of the original 24 families. Parlaying his position as a member of the crew, Bob's dad ultimately got to know all of the wealthy families and carefully selected a mentor from amongst the group who shared with Bob's dad, insights in the ways of successful investing and entrepreneurship. In the early 1960s, the governing board of the island decided that the most efficient way to run the community facilities was to award a single contract to one operator. And Bob's dad had an inside shot due to his relationship with his mentor, having proven himself reliable and trustworthy. Bob's dad quickly realized that the most lucrative part of the entire operation was the tea shop. Now's a good time to start taking notes. The tea shop was only open for breakfast and lunch during the week, and an occasional special evening event, leaving plenty of time for Bob's mom and dad to spend with the family in evenings and weekends. Because of the significant size of the homes, many generations of families come and stay on the island home for the entire summer. At many points throughout the year, the island is bustling with young children and teenagers far from the influences of big city life. Bob's dad understood the needs and desires of his customers and the quality of life they were attempting to create on the island. Bob's dad also took advantage of the opportunity to learn from the millionaires who called the island their summer home, and wasted no time when it was suggested to him that it might be a good idea to negotiate a deal with the only beverage distributor on the island of St. Thomas to run 3 pipelines directly to the tea shop to provide fresh drinking water, milk, and St. Thomas beer, the 3 most popular beverages. By negotiating this agreement and cutting distribution costs, the boats bringing beverages could not compete, thereby giving Bob's dad a complete monopoly on supplying the beverages for the entire island. Bob's dad was so successful in how he ran the tea shop and provided value to the islanders that the governing board ultimately decided to grant him a 50-year exclusive contract. Bob's dad passed away 3 years ago. His mother was no longer able to assist in the running of the tea shop, and his younger brother and sister simply had no interest, despite the fact that the tea shop was the basis for the family's income and wealth. The income from the beverage operation, as well as the investment advice Bob's dad obtained, was enough to make Bob's family very wealthy. So wealthy that all of Bob's siblings went to the very best private and Ivy League schools, and many years before Bob's dad's passing, his mother and father were able to purchase one of the finest homes on David's Island, a home which his mother had wanted her entire life. Bob's dilemma is that he is not a very good business person. Bob attempted to expand the tea shop in a number of different directions, namely by reducing the allocation of water, that's fresh drinking water, by the way, and purchasing excess quantities of St. Thomas beer and other alcoholic beverages, since they had the highest profit margins. Ordering more beer steins and introducing the concept of fresh coconuts as beverage containers. Unfortunately, all Bob managed to do was to create a huge mess and many unhappy customers. In addition, the tea shop's major supplier, the distributor on the mainland, was threatening to cut off the supply of water and take action for unpaid bills. Over the weekend, you sat down with a small but representative sample of the island residents and discovered the following. And here's a good place to take notes. All of the island residents get their beverages from the tea shop, including beverages for their own parties at their own homes. They are willing to pay a premium to have the tea shop do for them what they really could do for themselves, because buying from the tea shop saves them time. Time to them is way more important than money. Number 2, 90% of the residents of the island drink water. Water has the lowest profit margin, but is consumed in mass quantities, not only at the tea shop, but also to be taken home for making the other beverages, like iced tea. And everyone on the island buys water every day. Number 3, 50% of the islanders drink milk in various forms, including milk, milkshakes, homemade ice cream, and of course in their tea. And they also take it home to use in their other meals, like for breakfast. Number 4, 5% drink St. Thomas beer or other alcoholic beverages, most only at lunch on Fridays. Number 5, since Bob took over the tea shop, there have been constant shortages of clean containers to drink water at the tea shop and to transport it back home. The latest Bob did what story centers around the fact that one day Bob ran out of cups and the islanders had to come to the tap, cupping their hands to get the water for a day. While it makes for an amusing story, the islanders were not happy. Number 6, Bob also likes to serve milk in ice-cold beer steins. The problem is that the mothers on the island want their children drinking milk out of cups, not beer steins. Number 7, Bob introduced the concept of fresh coconuts cut in half to serve beverages, but it makes the water and beer taste funny. Bob thinks it's cool and the wave of the future. Others do not. Some complain from the splinters from the coconuts. Others just want to keep things simple. Fresh water or milk in a clean glass. It's Monday morning. Despite the interviews, you still manage to have some quality time with your children on the tennis court, a sunset stroll with your spouse. Oh, if you could only find a way to live on David's Island forever, not as a consultant, but as an owner. You have a few hours before it's time to board the plane. Bob asks you, what should I do? What do you tell Bob? Discuss it amongst yourselves. You have 10 minutes. Okay, who wants to go first? Who wants to go first? What should Bob do? What should Bob do?
He should do exactly what the people in the island want to do.
Okay, you should do exactly what the people in the island want him to do. What does that mean? Yes, sir.
Go back to what his dad was doing.
Go back to what his dad was doing, which means what?
Just supply water and just I can't remember everything.
What's the percentage of people that drink water?
90%.
Actually,
90%.
That's a whole.
90%.
Right.
Okay? What's the percentage drink alcoholic beverages? 5. Is Bob going in the wrong direction?
Yeah.
What else? What else we need to know? What else should Bob be thinking about?
Resign.
Resign. Yes, ma'am.
Just like our waitress.
We said to bottle the water in the milk and charge a premium
To bottle the water?
to bottle it because they want containers to transport it in.
Uh-huh.
So we need to make a deal with a container or paper supplier or a glass maker to transport the item.
To transport it.
Yeah, because they want to transport.
Okay.
That's what they said. Okay, and then we also need to decrease the beer supply.
Gotcha.
And we need to charge them 20 to 33% more than what they're being charged now.
Charging more when you're already at risk of losing your contract. Is that what you guys really think?
Buyout, so get Bob to assign the contract to you, buy out Bob's portion or interest in it,
Okay.
which is entire.
Yeah.
Get your funding from the residents that want you to do this,
Gotcha.
and
So let me get this correct. As a complete outsider, you're going to come in, you're going to push Bob's dad's son out.
no, you're going to offer him some good money to keep him wealthy so that he can stay there.
Okay.
The funding, you're going to go to your wealthy 24 families.
Right. Who don't know you from Boo.
But they've come to you and said that they want you to make this good.
Where is that? Show me where it says that.
It says they're willing to pay a premium.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What about if you partner with Bob so that he's still in the picture, but you're making the majority of the business decisions?
Okay.
Because it would give you the ability to both, go have a person that the people
Right.
at least know, but then they understand there's new management.
Okay.
And like she was saying, the idea about bottling
Yes.
the water,
Yes.
to still do that and maybe have, in order to try to smooth things over with
Yes.
the people that you kind of pissed off for a while,
Yes.
maybe have like one day out of the week where
Yes.
you're supplying free water to them and bringing it to them because their time is more important to them than their money, but you still have to smooth things over with.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Why don't you just drop the alcoholic beverages
Okay.
and the containers? You don't have to drop the beer.
And as Bob said, from my cold dead hands.
You're gonna have 5% that really piss off people.
And you get a drink, and I'm just saying the proceeds that from the alcohol
Right.
that you're upping the premium for the water and for the milk, and you're
Right.
having the right containers for that.
So you're going to give the beer away for free and charge the babies for the milk.
If you're going to deliver water, you can assume they'll probably use more because it's more convenient. So you're going to need more water.
Right.
So shut off the beer lines, have it converted to a water line so you get more water to get your beer to the boat again.
Okay. Everybody like Everybody like the idea of the coconut cup, water and coconut cups? Is that okay?
No.
Yes, ma'am. Eugenia.
We had said similar to the same things, but we were going to charge a premium for the delivery. So we're going to deliver milk and water and charge a premium.
All right.
We were also going to charge more for the alcohol, since it's a smaller consumption. And then we wanted 60% of the partnership. Bob still is a silent partner. His name's still in the building. He still gets some profits, but we pretty much manage and control all the operations.
I love it. Y'all spend a weekend on the island and you're rubbing Bob out. I'm gonna give you 40% of your business, baby. There's a new kid in town.
Bob's messing up things. We talked about partnership.
Still doing the what?
But seriously though, I mean seriously, y'all are funny because here you are, you spend a weekend. Nobody knows who you are, other than the fact you came and did some surveys. And you're talking about we're going to take over.
You got additional streams of income. You got a perfectly good tea house room there that's only open 5 days a week.
Yes.
You got a bunch of boards, kids and teenagers. Yes. Like movie night and stuff like that.
So give the kids beer.
For the babies.
Whatever. But you got a whole facility there.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yes, ma'am.
I would say that there are certain cultural issues here. And
cultural issues? God, what you been teaching these people, man?
Maybe she should say town.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so therefore he needs to listen to what islanders need, right?
Yes,
I mean, they need water. They need milk?
No, it didn't say they were from the islands.
They're from the U.S.
No, they're just summer vacationers. But
still, to me, more people need water, right?
Yes.
And he also needs to provide the water in the type of containers that they are used to.
Bless your heart. What's your name? Claudette. Bless your heart.
What was that?
Claudette said, and I quote, "Give them clean water in a clean glass, for crying out loud, Bob. Stop this shenanigans of putting milk and beer and coconut and people getting splinters in their hands."
But if you deliver the water to their house, they got their own cups. They can drink it out wherever they want.
As best I can tell, for 50 years, people have been coming to this tea shop to get clean water in a clean glass. Now, if we decide to deliver, that's great, but that's not the heart of the problem. And now I know why my business school professors love doing case studies. Because A, you can spend a half an hour in the back of the room eating chips. And talking with your other professor buddies. And B, there's so many different directions you can go. And truly, there are a number of different answers. And there are no quote-unquote wrong answers, but clearly there's some obvious answers. So let's talk about this, and then I want to take you into a study. I'm chuckling up here because so many times I hear new investors saying many of the same things that you guys are saying. Okay? And as an example, I'm not picking on anybody. So-and-so has a business, they've been working the business for years, all of a sudden they got lazy or they turned it over to a brother or something, and I'm just going to step in and take it over. You know? New sheriff in town, you know? And I chuckle because back when I used to do a boot camp, I would have folks come in and I would say to them, now, I'm willing to mentor you and I'll help you. And I literally would have people come to me and say, well, Sherman, I think I've come up with a solution. I said, what's that? One of them deals that you're working on? Yes. I'm going to be your partner on that. Like, okay, and what do I get out of this picture? And they couldn't understand when I said, well, why don't we go help you do your own deal? No, I'm going to be your partner on your deal. Well, I've already got money lined up. The contract is working. Yeah, but I'm going to be your partner. I'm going to be your 50-50 partner. And some of this about, well, we want, Bob, we're taking 60%. Non-negotiable. The second thing I heard, which is equally humorous, is, well, let's come up with a new distribution system. Or let's go ahead and buy some trucks and we'll deliver it to people. I mean, again, I'm not picking on anybody. But the reality is for 50 years it worked. And then Bob's dad passed away. The two other siblings said we're not interested. Bob got it, and Bob screwed it all up because Bob's a knucklehead. And typically knuckleheads screw stuff up. That's by definition. People who are hard-headed, who come to boot camp, learn something, then will go off and do it their own way. It's like you took the manual that the guy gave you. You know, where's your manual, right? You take the manual. You know, do you guys realize how much of Rob's life went into this? I hope you do. And then you say, you know what? That was all good, and I spent 3 days, I spent X amount of money, but I'm gonna do it my way. Okay? That's what Bob is. He's a chucklehead. People want clean water and clean glasses, folks. That's it. Now, maybe you can enhance that, but until you get the clean water and the clean glasses part right, you got, what did we say, 24 families and then 26 more? So what's that, 30? 50. I was never very good at math. You got 50 families that are used to something a certain way, okay? Classic example, a new investor, okay? All the investors are down in Capitol Heights. I swear to goodness, I got this phone call one time. Had a young lady who wanted me to mentor her. And I said, well, what part of the business do you want to get into? I'm not sure yet. So she came to boot camp. She said, okay, I like the wholesaling. Cool, I like the wholesaling. Great, I can help you there. What do I need to do? Sherman, what do I need to do? You need to go down to Capitol Heights, which is a part of Prince George's County where a lot of deal flow is, just like in certain pockets of Baltimore, Palmer Park, okay? So you need to go to Capitol Heights, you need to make offers. Next time I saw her, I said, well, how's it going? Not so good. Why? How many offers did you put out? I put out 50 offers. Really? And you didn't get anything? What were the parameters you were using to make your offers? She told me. I said, I don't understand. How could you put out 50 offers where you had your hard money letter, you did all this stuff? How could you do that in Capitol Heights and not get a single phone call? Capitol Heights? Oh, no. I was making offers in Accokeek. Accokeek? I don't know any investors in Accokeek. And some of y'all laugh, but you'll do the same thing. You're putting water in coconut glasses, folks. Or actually, said another way, you're trying to sell beer in a milk neighborhood. Trying to sell beer in a neighborhood. Another mistake that new investors make. In the state of Maryland, right now, as we sit here today, the most favored way of taking in a piece of property is through a limited liability company. Okay? And we talked earlier about the ability to assign a contract by right. There is a point in time where you're not allowed to assign a contract by right. Does anybody know when that is?
Bank REO purchase?
Sorry?
When you buy a house from a bank as an REO?
Why?
Because they specifically exclude it in their contract.
Because the bank specifically prohibits. If one of the parties of the contract specifically says you may not assign the contract, you may not assign the contract. You can't do it. See, one of the basic fundamental premises of contract law is you have to have two parties who agree. Well, if one says you cannot assign and you say I'm going to assign anyway, you didn't agree. Okay? So if the contract specifically says you may not assign, you can't assign it. So how do you get around that? Or you just simply don't do business? You form an entity. And if the bank agrees to do business with that entity, whatever that entity is, and you assign your interest in the entity goes over here with the contract with it. You guys with me? So one of the favored ways of doing business in Maryland and in many other states is to form an LLC and to make offers in the name of that LLC. Or oftentimes, in which I'm going to show you, is I will make an offer in the name of a to-be-formed LLC. And if the bank accepts my contract, I can form the LLC, and as long as the bank says you may not sell your LLC without our permission, which they never do, then I can sell my LLC. I didn't sign the contract. Contract's with the LLC. It's not with me personally. It's with the LLC. So, I know some of you guys, this is kind of hard to understand, okay? And I understand that, particularly anybody who's never been in business before. But when you create an entity, whether it's a C Corp, an S Corp, a limited liability company, limited liability partnership, you have created a fictitious person. It's a new entity. And anybody who's been in business for a while understands when you do business with an LLC, you're not doing business with that individual, you're doing business with that individual's entity. So if a bank agrees to accept an offer from you through your entity, they're doing business with the entity, okay? And there's nothing in the law that says you cannot turn around and sell your entity to somebody else. In Maryland, one of the favorite ways of doing business is through an LLC. Now, how does I get back to the story with Bob? Had somebody come to me, wanted to do wholesaling, showed him how to do it, told him to go form an LLC, told him that then they should make offers in a new LLC. Every time they make an offer, the offer should be done in the name of a new to-be-formed LLC. They said to me, what are you talking about? I said, you form an LLC, that's your doing business entity. Okay, if you already have a corporation, nothing wrong with that. Okay, but then when you make your offer, you make the offer in the name of a to-be-formed LLC. If I'm making an offer on 123 Mulberry Street, I will probably put in the contract, the buyer is a to-be-formed LLC, 123 Mulberry LLC. You guys with me? Have I lost anybody? If I have, just tell me now, because I want to make sure everybody gets this. Yes, ma'am. In my contracts now, I say to be formed. I didn't always do that, but I do now. To be formed LLC. So I will say the buyer is 123 Mulberry LLC, comma, a to be formed Maryland Limited Liability Company. So if they accept my offer, they know I'm going to go out and form an LLC. And that's how I do business. And people will say to me, well, or I've had one person say to me, well, I was, Sherman, I'm out there and I'm making offers and I'm getting stuff contract and then I can't wholesale it to anybody. I say, well, show me what your parameters are, and they show me what the parameters are, and then what's your analysis? They show me analysis. And I say, well, how are you writing the contracts? Oh, I'm writing the contract in the name of my corporation. I said, and you're saying to be formed LLC? They said, no. I said, wait a minute, if you put in the name of your corporation, then you have to sell your corporation. I said, yeah, I understand that. Well, have you done business in your corporation? Oh, yeah, I've got this partnership over there and this part. Well, wait a minute, you don't understand. If you want to assign the contract, you can't assign the contract because the contract says you can't assign it. So you have to assign the entity that's buying it. And if you assign, and you can't, nobody's going to come up along and buy your operating company if in fact you've got all these other transactions. Some of you, I'm sure, don't have you with me, so let me explain it a little bit a little bit different. What people want on this island, and what people want in the outside world, is clean water in a clean glass. I know Steve. I like Steve. Steve's a good guy. I know Claudette. I'm getting to know Claudette. Claudette seems like a nice lady. Okay? But I swear to you, it's a real probability that if I go back here and pour some Pepsi in a glass and give it to Steve, Claudette does not want to drink behind Steve. When Steve finishes that Coke or that Pepsi, if I take that glass, oh, here we go, right here. Claudette, would you like some water? Well, he's a nice guy. Look at him. Come on over here. All right? And that's life, folks. And that's life. I don't want to come back behind somebody else and possibly clean up their mess. You with me? Same is true in the business world. Same is true in my real estate investing. If I'm going to buy out your position, I want to buy out your position in a clean container. Do not give me water in a coconut shell. Give me clean water in a clean glass, please. Another issue that I see a lot of investors, new investors, they want to get creative. Another, they went to some course, didn't even pay money for it, it was a freebie. And in the back of it, they got something called the Guatemala Non-Residual Non-Retainer Trust. And they decided they're going to make an offer on real estate because they read somewhere in some free ebook that the Guatemala Non-Retainer Trust was the wave of the future. So they're out there making offers all day long. Now all of a sudden they want to wholesale the deal to somebody else. And they call Rob. Rob, I got a deal for you. Okay, what is it? I got this property. It's beautiful. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And I got it under contract. That's cool. Send me over the paperwork. And they send over the paperwork, and there's a contract, and it says the buyer is XYZ Trust, a Guatemala non-residual, non-retainer trust. Rob says, what in the world is that? And he said, I now have to go back to the bank and unwind this mess. Why in the world did you write a contract to buy a property in the name of this container that you're really not sure what it is? I went to this seminar and got a free ebook, and it said it was the wave of the future. No. I want clean water in a clean glass. So if in your marketplace, and we're talking now about Maryland, okay, but you need to go to the real estate investor group meetings, whichever real estate investor group you want to say, and find out, what are people doing? What are they using? And if in your marketplace, folks are using LLCs, guess what? You want to be buying properties in LLCs. Now, if after they buy the property from you or buy the contract or buy the deal from you, they decide to disband the LLC and form a trust, great. But if in your marketplace, everybody's used to an LLC, they understand what an LLC is, and you formed a specific one-time special use LLC for that transaction, then you don't have to explain anything. I guess so many people say, well, in Maryland, an LLC costs $100. Yeah. And what kind of a wholesale fee are you looking at? I don't know. Well, I tell you what you should be looking at. In most cases, you ought to be looking at $5,000 wholesale fee. If it's a really fantastic deal, you probably are going to be somewhere in the $10,000 range. If you add value, if you put the clean water in a clean glass and then put a covering over it, put it in the truck, and then deliver it to people's houses, and you've added some value, then maybe you can add some more. How do you add value? What are some of the ways you add value in a wholesale deal? Well, one way to add value is to bring a contractor along. Maybe you got a contractor. Maybe your contractor is willing to do the work. And the person you're going to wholesale the deal to doesn't have a contractor. That's value add. Maybe the way you add value is you bring the hard money lender. Maybe somebody wants to get their first deal done, but they don't have a relationship with the lender. One of the secrets of wholesaling, every single type of real estate investing has certain things that are like the golden secrets. And once you learn them, you will make a ton of money. In wholesaling, one of the golden secrets is having pre-qualified buyers already lined up. I'm pretty sure Rob already told you that. You told him that, right?
No, I didn't.
Or you telling that tomorrow?
We're on selling now.
Oh, I'm
so,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No
Oh,
problem.
man. Oh.
No problem, brother.
I'm sorry, man. No problem. In wholesaling, when you wholesale deals, one of the ways that you can enhance the deal is if you bring a lender, a hard money lender, to the table that the person who's taking you out or the person who's taking your position may not have had a relationship with. And let me kind of break it down for you. Today, the bulk of our activity is not wholesaling. There's very few deals that I wholesale today. There was a point in time where wholesaling was all that I did. And you can make pretty good money wholesaling. During one stretch of time, took me about 9 months, I think I made about $90,000 just wholesaling deals. So you can make $10,000 a month, boom, 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 boom. So if you get good at it, you can make some money. The downside of wholesaling is, quite honestly, wholesaling is work. Wholesaling is a job. Never forget that. It lifts me out. But by the same token, once you learn it, it's like riding a bike. It's with you. Nobody can ever take it away from you. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need a quick $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 cash, wholesaling is a great way to do it. But it is work. But one of today we do mainly rehabbing. We have basically three ways that we finance our deals. We have a relationship with Brookview Financial, which some of you may be familiar with. Brookview is a great relationship lender for rehabbers. They will finance 100% of your rehabbing. And their cost structure is as competitive as any hard money lender that I know of. And most important, and the reason why they're important to us, is they will go into any jurisdiction. They will go into DC, they'll go into Maryland, they'll go anywhere in the country, just about. I think there's like 2 states they won't go into because they're not licensed. But pretty much they'll go into any jurisdiction that we're involved in. That's important, because if we got a deal in DC, we want to be able to just jump on it. The second key relationship that we have today is with BB&T, which is a traditional bank. And they loan in a traditional manner. They will loan us rehab money on single-family houses at 6%, 1 point, which is really cheap money. The problem is they will not loan 100%. What they do is they take the total amount of your acquisition, the total amount of your rehab, and they'll only loan you 70%. So every time we borrow money from them, we're short 30% of the money. And the way that we bridge that gap is we also have a very aggressive private lender program where we pay individuals who want to invest with us 8 to 12%. And oftentimes we'll put them in a second position. So as an example, if we have a transaction and it's going to be worth $140,000 ARV, $140,000 after repair value, and it's going to cost us $70,000 to acquire it and $30,000 to do the rehab, we'll borrow $70,000 for BB&T at 6%. We'll borrow $30,000 from our private lender program from one of our private lenders at 12%, and that's enough to buy and rehab, and then the $40,000, resale value that represents our profit. Okay. Having said that, so we got Brookview, we've got BB&T, and we got a private lender program. I loaned it to Rob, I loaned it to Alex back there on the camera, even though Alex has never rehabbed a house before. Okay. And if you're going to wholesale properties, and if you think wholesaling is a niche that you want to get into, make sure you have relationships with hard money lenders who are just like this guy. I put it under contract, and he is, you probably already know who he is, Dr. Rex Frost. Everybody's like, yeah, I know. It's true. In terms of dealing deals in the state of Maryland, Rex has got the best deal in town, and he never runs out of money. In fact, I will tell you, if you ever call Rex up and he says, "Oh, I'm out of money," what he's really saying is, "I don't want to do business with you." That's really what he's saying, because he never runs out of money. But if I put a property under contract, and it doesn't have to be Rex. I mean, I'm talking about Rex, but there's other hard money lenders, and I know Rob's going to give you a list. A true hard money lender, somebody who's really in the business of providing hard money, could care less who's going to sign the paperwork. Now, that doesn't mean that you get a property under contract, get a loan commitment from Rex, and then turn around and wholesale it to somebody else, and not at least pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Rex, I'm assigning the deal to somebody else." You still got to give him the courtesy of letting him know where his money's going. But the reality is, what they're looking at is the deal. They're looking at the underlying parameters of the deal. And a true hard money lender will make a wholesaler very wealthy, because it's true value add. Now all of a sudden, I'm not just somebody who's trying to wholesale you a deal and then I'm out of it. I'm a wholesaler who's going to provide an underlying loan from a lender who will loan to anybody. So now all of a sudden my wholesale fees go from $10,000 maybe to $12,000. How do you determine? It's a very subjective thing. It's a negotiated thing. But generally speaking, if you do your analysis from a rehabber's perspective and you believe that there is $30,000 or $40,000 profit in that deal, then a $10,000 wholesale fee is more than appropriate. If, on the other hand, you do it from a rehabber's perspective and you think there's only $20,000 in the deal for the rehabber, to ask for a $15,000 wholesale fee is ridiculous. There's people who are out there, calling themselves wholesalers that are doing that kind of stuff, but that's just a ridiculous statement. In other words, you're saying to me, you're going to make more money for taking no risk than I, as a rehabber, are going to make for taking on the construction risk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a ridiculous proposition. So one of the things the other key to being a successful wholesaler, and again, I just throw it out here because I know you guys are here for a rehabber's boot camp, but if you do want to wholesale and you think maybe you want to wholesale for a while, and there's good reason why you might want to wholesale for a while. We'll talk about that in just a second. But if you are going to be a wholesaler and it's something that you want to kind of carve out as a niche, you absolutely positively need to make sure that whoever you wholesale your deals to, that they make money. Because if you're wholesaling deals and the only one who's making money in this game is you're not going to get any more return phone calls. You get a chance to do that once. Usually you can pull that on a complete novice investor who doesn't know what they're doing. A more experienced investor will look at the deal and go, "You're out of your mind." Well, it's going to go quick. I love when they say, "It's going to go fast. It's going to go fast. It's going to go fast." I say, "Well, let it go fast." Better to not do a deal than do a bad deal. Just to kind of recap, reasons to wholesale. Reason to wholesale is quick cash. Reason to wholesale is if you find yourself in a position where you have not quite completed your team, but you still want to be in this business and you're building towards being a rehabber, but you don't have a contractor on board yet and you're still getting some pieces in place. Rather than letting that transaction go by you and you not make anything, why not wholesale it to another investor? When you're looking to wholesale to people, quite honestly, everybody in this room who thinks that they want to wholesale, the person that they want to talk to before they leave is me. No, the person they want to talk to before they leave is Rob. And you want to make sure you really understand what is he looking for. And if you find a deal like that and you say, "You know what, I'm not ready yet. I'm not quite ready to take on that much responsibility, or I don't have my contract," call Rob. Better for you to walk away with a $5,000 payday. And when you sit down and really analyze how much work goes into wholesaling properties, when you really get good at this stuff and you start implementing the stuff that Rob's teaching you, if you spend more than 10, 15 hours a week up until the time, I'm not talking about rehabbing, I'm talking about up until the time that you're ready to rehab, In other words, finding deals, the marketing, the whole 9 yards. If you spend more than 10 hours a week, you're probably spending too much time. You may spend more than that getting started, but once you really get going and you get really efficient, 10 hours a week. And you ought to be able to crank out at least one wholesale deal, maybe 2 wholesale deals a month. So in other words, for about 20 hours worth of work, you ought to be able to make $5,000. And then that number should keep on getting down to about 10 hours worth of work, you ought to make $5,000. If you calculate that on an hourly basis, you know, I'm not very good at math, but I think it's a lot. 500 bucks an hour, something like that. $250 an hour, you know. Certainly better than flipping burgers at McDonald's, you know. And you can do it from the leisure of your own home. You can do it from your beds, for crying out loud, sitting there doing your analysis. You can do that with pillows propped up watching Monk or something like that. But there's other reasons to wholesale besides just the cash and the other stuff. One reason to wholesale deals is an excuse for Rob to call you back. Now, I say Rob, but it doesn't have to be Rob, okay? It could be any experienced rehabber out there, okay? But, you know, you're here. There's 40 people in this room, right? Okay? And if all 40 people call Rob, Rob's got to decide who he's going to call back first, right? And let's get real, right? So is Rob going to call the person back who says, Rob, I came to your thing, and I think I left my coat in the room. Can you go back to the hotel and find it for me? Versus the person says, Rob, I found a deal. I'm not quite ready to do it myself, but if it's something that you're interested in, I'd be willing to take a wholesale fee. And Sherman says I ought to ask for $10,000, but you know, Rob, if I can spend a couple more days with you, I'll cut my fee to $5 if I can get on your calendar for lunch 3 times next month. Or if I wholesale the deal to you, you walk me through the entire process on this deal so I can follow it through all the way to the end. I get my cake and I can eat it too. Okay? So the other reason to be doing wholesale deals is to use it as currency. And again, it doesn't have to be Rob. There are other rehabbers out there that you may want to get close to. A great way to get close to somebody is to bring something to the table, quite honestly. And if you're bringing deals to the table, people will return your phone calls all day long. I'm not saying that Rob won't return your phone calls, but the reality is if 40 people called him tomorrow and said, Rob, I got a question for you, he's got to decide which one he's going to call back first. And the easiest way to get Rob or me or anybody else to call you back first is to have something in hand. That's just plain truth. Okay. Other reasons to wholesale, you may get your whole rehab machine working and then something happens where your contractor's laid up. That happened to me. I had a whole system going and I was ready to rock and roll and my contractor got caught up in something. And so, you know, I was like, okay, I can either wholesale it and take a quick $5,000 or I can try and rehab this one myself and go to school with a bunch of new contractors I don't know and possibly make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. If the profit margin had been big enough, like a $30,000 or $40,000 payday, I would have said yeah. But in some cases, the profit margin was maybe about $20,000. So I said, you know what? If I can get to $7,500, I'm out. I'm done. And that's just a personal business decision that you have to make. Okay. All right. We got about 5 minutes. I'm going to walk you through real quick some of the documents and some of the things you're going to need to do wholesale deals. Yes, sir.
If you're referring a lot of business to a Rex Cross,
yes.
Is a reasonable expected referral fee, or is that just doing business?
No. You will not get any kind of a referral fee or a kickback from a lender. It is illegal. It is pretty much illegal for them to do so. You might get a toaster.
Get that bank.
Yeah, but it's pretty much anytime you start getting into financial and fiduciary. No, you just. So again, in fact, I do refer people to Rex from time to time. The best way to get value out of that kind of a relationship is to bring the deal and the person together. You know, and then you're getting paid, but you're getting paid in an indirect sort of way. You're getting paid a wholesale fee for putting the deal together, as opposed to getting, you know, and quite honestly, even if I was a hard money lender, even if it was legal for me to give somebody money, what would I give you? $100, $500 versus a $5,000 wholesale fee for basically the same. It's the same phone call. The only difference is you put yourself in the middle and structured the deal to make it work. So, real quick transaction. This is a house in Capitol Heights Boulevard, Capitol Heights, Maryland, 738. This is what it looked like before. That's what it looked like after. Certainly goes in the category of ugly house. 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. We turned it into a 3-bedroom. You can't see it on the side. There's a line here. But there's actually was a garage on the side. We turned the garage into a bedroom. How I found the house was I had a real estate agent who I was working with. She referred it to me. You can see the sign. You probably can't see the real teeny print. It says foreclosure. The house actually went to foreclosure. However, the real estate broker who had the listing still had the sign out front. I called the guy up. I said, hey, I see you got a sign out front. I see it went through foreclosure. I'm interested in buying your house. Would you sell that house to me? Guy's name is Charlie Nucciaroni down in Alexandria. Charlie said, Sherman, write something up and we'll see what we can do with it. This is the first time I ever used a letter of intent. That was my letter of intent. Real fancy stationery, had the name of my old company on it. Right? Didn't even say real estate. And this was the letter of intent I gave him. And I said, I'm going to pay $28,500 earnest money, settlement days 30 days after ratification, financing contingent none, all cash offer, as is. Also went on to say that one or more principles of Tradewinds Realty, which is my company, is a licensed real estate agent. Letter of intent expires 72 hours. You got to make a decision. Okay? How did I get there? Real simple. Before I did that, my offer worksheet. Look familiar? Might be different than Rob's, but hopefully the underlying concepts are the same. Thought the house would sell for $75,000. Less 0.75 gave me 56, and I thought that I could get a $5,000 wholesale profit on that deal. Less than 20,000 repairs. My offer price was $31,000, so I started off at 28. Okay? And then from there, called a real estate agent, gave him a letter of intent. Letter of intent wound up actually becoming a contract.
Sherman, you're more familiar with the DC area. What about the standard 70% ARV formula?
You can use 70%, you can use 0.65. I would never go above 0.70.
Even in like hotter, nicer neighborhoods?
If you're paying all cash and you're using hard money or any kind of high interest rate loan, I would never go above 7.70. If you're doing a subject to deal, where you're just simply taking over the existing mortgage, that's a different story, different type of analysis. But if you are doing an all cash offer where you're going to have to go out and get a new loan, I would never go above 0.70. Okay. Had to give him an earnest money check. This was my proof of funds. Anybody know what that is? Money in my retirement account. Was I going to use the money in my retirement account to buy this property? No. But I had money in my retirement account. If I had to buy it, I could have gotten it out, but that was not my intention. But I had to show him a proof of funds. Almost any time, now this happened to be a bank REO. Anytime you deal with a bank REO, you always have these riders. Don't let these riders scare you. Anytime you start saying, I'm buying the house as is, I mean, basically that's all the gobbledygook is in this thing. You should read it, but basically all the gobbledygook is that. And then we went to a signed contract, okay? Standard Board of Realtors contract. And again, one of the things that the guy put in was some of the purchasers are licensed. I get this question a lot. What if I have a real estate license? Do I have to disclose it? Of course you do. By law, you have to disclose it. It ain't no big deal. Last page of the contract, right? This is the last page of the contract. Some of the purchasers are licensed real estate agents in the District of Columbia. At the time, I was only licensed in D.C. That's it. Don't make mountains out of molehills. It ain't no big deal. You just simply say it. But again, standard Board of Realtors contract with a rider that talked about the fact that it was a bank REO, earnest money deposit. Okay, so this looking familiar to you guys? Now, I offered 28. We countered 32. It was still a good deal because I had done my analysis. I think I said I could have offered him up to 31. It was 32. I could have figured out a way to make up the extra $1,000 in profit. Okay? Everybody with me? So then what did I do? Well, we got the agreement signed, and you can see, in this particular case, I said 738 Capitol Heights Boulevard. It hadn't actually been formed yet. So 738 Capitol Heights LLC. It had not actually been formed. In this particular case, they wrote up the contract. It hadn't been formed. Today, the only thing different I do is I would actually put a to-be formed LLC. And if I have an existing business entity that I'm operating through, which I do, I will say a to-be formed Maryland LLC that is affiliated with my company. With the other LLC? With my operating. And the reason why I do that is because sometimes people will say, well, you're going to form this. Is there a track record? Do you have a balance sheet? Do you have any statements? Do you have anything? Okay.
Why have you recently added that?
The to be formed? Just to be technically correct. I guess that's from that law school rubbing off on me. Yeah, really.
You still form the LLC and then transfer it, though. You don't let whoever you're wholesaling to set it up, right?
That's correct. So then what did I do? I went up to Preston Street. And if you are doing business in Maryland, it is super simple. I downloaded a PDF off the SDAT website. That's what it looks like. SDAT, State Department of Assessment and Taxation. This is true in Maryland. It is not true in the District of Columbia. I don't know if it's true in Virginia. But if you're doing deals in Maryland and you have a Maryland LLC, it's real simple. So you download this form, and then in my particular case, I personally go to Preston Street in Baltimore. Preston Street in Baltimore, up on the 8th floor, you walk in for $100, you walk out the door sometime within the next 40 minutes with your LLC document in hand. And then I normally, if I'm doing deals in Baltimore City or Baltimore County, I will normally take them to my title company that's based in Baltimore County over in Essex, and I literally drive from Preston Street over there and start the title work. So that when I'm ready to assign the deal, the paperwork is already started. That's another way you add value. Clean water in a clean glass delivered to you. And oh, by the way, I also have some St. Thomas beer in the trunk, or some milk, because only 5% was the beer, the rest was milk. I also have a crate of milk on an ice chest in the truck, if you want it, okay? And that's how I add value. I create the LLC, I do all of that legwork, I start the title work, and I find a hard money lender who's willing to loan on the deal, whether it's me signing the paperwork or somebody else. That's how you add value. That's how you get your fees up from $5,000 to $7,000. Okay? Now, one mistake that I made, and fortunately I corrected myself in Preston Street. Do you see where this scribble is? I had already had this deal assigned, and I had that person sign it. And when I was standing at Preston Street, I was like, you know what? I better put my name here. Okay? Because if anything should go wrong, like nothing goes wrong, right? Then I don't have to come back and get her to get her name off the paperwork in this case. Okay? You guys with me? And when you do that and you pay your $100 fee, you walk out of there with a piece of paper that looks just like that. And it says, Articles of Organization, Seminary Account. On the spot. Yes, sir.
Is there anything special we need to put on that article or Articles of Organization?
With respect to?
I don't know, something that
well, let's see what it says here. The acquisition, repair, rental, and or ultimate disposition of a single-family house in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Let me tell you what I do differently now. I also put in there, after I put a period, and or any other legal purpose under Maryland law. That is my all-encompassing, I can do whatever I want. So that is the one other change that I do now that's different. Okay? So again, you walk out of there on the spot with this, and that means that your entity's formed. And I take that to the title company, and that's all they need. Yes, sir.
Where'd you go to do that? What office?
Preston Street.
In what city?
It's in Baltimore. 301 West Preston Street. And again, the fee structure is today, because it changes, $50 if you want them to mail it back to you. Do not accept that option. You do not want to be trying to wholesale a deal and somebody says to you, okay, where's the glass? It's in the mail. In the mail sent by who? In the mail sent by the government. I know it'll be here next week. Wrong. When they mail this back to you, I think on average it takes a month. One took me 3 months. You walk in, you pay the extra $50, people. It's just a transaction cost. You know who eats that transaction cost? The ultimate buyer. If it costs me $100, guess what I'm charging? Okay? It's just and you wait. You physically wait for them to call your name, and they will say, 738 Capitol Heights LLC. Yep, that's me. Here you go. Okay, that's it. Make sure you walk out the right one. Yes, ma'am.
I know you're not a lawyer.
Yes, that is true. Please say that again. And I am not giving legal advice.
We're formed in Virginia.
Yes.
And we don't know anyone in Maryland.
Okay.
And we don't have resident agent in Maryland. Is there?
Resident agency in Maryland is so super simple. It's so much easier in Virginia because I have a company that's a Virginia corporation too. Virginia corporation, the lawyers have a more powerful lobby in Virginia than they do in Maryland. So in Virginia, to have a resident agent, it has to be a lawyer or an officer of the company who lives in Virginia. Maryland is much easier. What Maryland says is the resident agent for an entity can either be somebody who lives in the state or a valid, in good standing Maryland entity. So you can form one Maryland corporation and get your best friend, pay a fee, and create a Maryland LLC, and then every transaction from there on out, that new LLC can be the resident agent. So Maryland makes it really super simple for you. DC, I couldn't comment on. I don't know. People's Republic, man. If you've ever even read the laws in DC where they post stuff on the website and you get these forms, the first thing they tell you is you cannot fill it out yourself. You have to have a lawyer do it. Second thing is if you actually read the document, it's got at least 6 or 7 typos in it. Okay, now look, I'm not the world's best speller, but I'm not the government of DC either, okay? You can at least get somebody to run a spell check, okay? All right. Now, how do you actually do this? You use something called an assignment. And it looks pretty close to an assignment of a contract. In consideration for the sum of $8,500. How did I come up with $8,500? Well, I wanted $7,500. That was real cash. Plus, I wanted to be reimbursed for my non-refundable earnest money deposit. See, some of y'all forget that, and you walk out of the transaction with $1,000 less than you thought. You put if you put up $1,000 earnest money deposit, we talked about that, right? The difference between a bird dog and a wholesaler is a wholesaler is at risk. You got to put up the $1,000. But you're not going to put up $1,000 not at least get it back. In fact, I would suggest to you if you're going to wholesale a deal, the second you've got somebody on the hook, the one thing I would do different here is I'm going to want a $2,000 non-refundable deposit from the person I'm wholesaling it to. Why? Because if the deal falls apart, I want my $1,000 plus $1,000. I'm going to get paid for something. This took me 5 minutes. I got to get paid, right? But the language is pretty straightforward. Now, this is one thing that I do that a lot of people will not do and say don't do, but I will actually warrant and represent. That is very specific binding language. When I warrant and represent, that means that if there's anything that's not true, they can come after me. Now, I don't personally warrant and represent because the assigner is who? The assigner is the LLC, okay? But I do put this language in as an additional level of comfort. And what I'm basically saying is that this LLC is a clean glass. It's a clean glass. I went to the store and bought you a clean glass. I am not giving Claudette Steve's glass. It's a clean glass, okay? And what this warrant and represent means is that I formed a new entity. The only thing this entity has done is put a contract on this piece of property. And I better well do that. I'm not going to take this brand new entity that I drove all the way up to Preston Street to create and now go out and make more offers using that same entity's name or get myself in some entanglement with that entity. No. That entity exists for one person, for one purpose, to be a clean container for me to deliver this contract to somebody else. Yes, sir.
Is there a copy of these or similar forms in our book, or can we get a copy?
You don't have them, but I'll make sure that you get them. And in fact, Rob, we're going to have a website. Yeah. So for the next, was it 3 months worth of coaching and mentoring? Well, 3 days.
It's 30 days. It's 30 days on the phone. Okay. And then it's 3 months via email.
Okay.
And I think there's going to be 2 teleconferences or so.
Okay, so 60 days. So during that period of time, there will be a place on the website for you guys to grab stuff. This will be on that website. And as long as Rob, we have your email addresses and everything else, you'll get an email. It probably won't be Monday, but sometime during this week, you'll get an email saying the website's up and all this stuff will be in there.
Sure, you obviously prefer to do this yourself as opposed to letting the title company handle it?
Do what?
This assignment?
I do this myself.
Okay.
This is what I get paid $1,000 for 5 minutes of work for. I have to do something. But no, yeah, I mean, this is the part that you don't really want to delegate, especially when you're using language like a warrant. Now, not everybody does. I mean, I do that, but not everybody else does. Okay? And then I also take the additional step of when it's time to actually turn it over, I actually gave the person, hey, here's a cover letter. And this is what you need to do. This is the value add portion where I turn around and I say, I'm charging $75. Now, did you see my workup? How much did I think I was going to get on my assignment fee? 5,000. So how do you go from 5,000 to 7,500? By all this value add. I'm doing all this work. It's taking me at least 3 hours to do all this stuff. Well, I had to drive to Preston Street. I had to wait 30 minutes to get the piece of paper. You know, Baltimore was 30 minutes from my house, and then another 3 hours. I should charge another $2,500 for 3 hours. In terms of this is just a cover letter where the person who I was assigning it to. Now, you guys see the date on this? Understand, I had a business that was impacted by September 11th. I actually originally bought this house thinking I was going to rehab it. So there was actually an additional value add that I had on this, which is I actually had a contractor in place. And the reason why I didn't go forward on the rehab, or the reason why I chose at that time to wholesale it to somebody else was because I had to prove something to my wife and to myself, which was that through this real estate investing, I could make as much money in a month as I was normally making with my business. Okay? So if I could bring in a quick $7,500 and do it every month, then I didn't have to go get a job. that was my motivation. You know? That's what I want to do. Now, yes, sir.
I know you're doing this for wholesale. When you do your rehab,
yes.
Do you set up your LLCs the same way?
Yes, the same way. The only additional step that I would do, and that's a great question, Ken, because you're right at this particular slide. The only additional thing that I would do for a rehab that I would not do for a wholesale is I would go ahead and apply for and get a tax ID number. And you can get this off the IRS website, SS4, and this is what you use to apply for a tax ID number. And that is necessary because if in fact you want to hold properties in a separate entity. If it's a separate entity, it has to have its own tax ID. And if you get this, and you fax it to the IRS, they will actually fax you your tax ID number back or mail it to you back. Excuse me.
Do you need that? You need that if you're going to retail the house. Rehab it in retail.
I would suggest to you at a certain point before you do this that you sit down with a CPA and let them get an understanding as to what you're doing. And in this particular case, the advice that was given to me was you should form your own, do everything in its own entity, and it should have its own separate tax ID. The other reason why you might do this is if you have the title company, and the title company demands that you have your own tax ID number. And there are certain title companies that will do that. Title companies have gotten very tight with their requirements. After 9/11, there was a bunch of laws that got passed, and a lot of them have to do with money laundering. And so a lot of the stuff that title companies have to do now are a direct result of the whole money laundering thing. So, yes, but I would not get the tax ID number if I was just simply going to wholesale. I would allow the person who got the LLC, because somebody who gets the LLC might very well say, you know what, thank you for giving it to me in a clean glass, but I would rather have my water in a coconut shell. So they'll take it and pour it into a coconut. So they might say, well, I'd rather take my properties in a trust. It's very easy if you have an LLC that has no other business activity for them to just simply dissolve it and put it into a trust before you go, particularly before you go to settlement. Because what will happen is they'll go to the title company and say, well, you know what, we got this property, but I've decided to take it in a trust rather than taking it in an LLC. And what then will happen is the person will say to you, well, I want to take it in a trust. And so you then go back to the seller and say, hey, can we amend the sales contract for one item? And the amendment is now going to say the buyer is yada, yada, yada land trust as opposed to yada, yada, yada LLC. Okay? Now, here's an issue that comes up. I want to talk about it real quick. You go to the settlement, and all of a sudden, you're there, the person who's buying the LLC from you is there, and the seller is there along with the seller's agent. And everybody's looking at each other going, who's the new guy? And it's a very simple answer. This is my money partner, or this is my business partner. And if you stop and think about it, think about this. I put a piece of property under contract, right? It's Koye. And Koye says to me, hey, Sherman, I know that you wholesale deals. How about wholesaling a deal to me? And I said, well, Koye, I'm not sure if I want to wholesale this one or do it myself. And Koye says, well, yeah, but I got $100,000 in the bank. Koye, come on over here. and we signed an agreement that says I'm doing all the legwork up until the time we put it under contract, but I'm going to take Koya on as a partner. And Koya says, you know what, Sherman, I like this except for one thing, which is if you ever decide you don't want to do any more work on this, I want the option to buy out your half. Right? Now, is that not a reasonable request? If he's putting up all the money that says, Sherman, if you ever get to the point that you just don't want to do it anymore, I want your half rather than you sell it to somebody else. Right? So we go to the settlement table, and 30 seconds after we sign off on the paperwork, I go, you know what? There's more stress than I need. I'm going back to David's Island and hang out in the sun. You know, buy me out. Right? So he buys me out, and I get a check, and we're done. And the check happens to be $7,500. Because up until that point in time, that's what my half is worth. Right? So what's the difference between doing that after we sign the paperwork versus 10 minutes before we sign the paperwork? Nothing. Or 10 days. So if I go to the closing, I say, Koya is my partner. Is he my partner? Sure. What, and you, the bank seller, what do you care if 30 seconds after we sign off all the paperwork, you leave and he writes me a check and now he's got my interest? What do you care? What can you do about it? Yeah, what can you do about it? But even if you could do it, what do you care? You got enough problems. Yeah. All you want to do is get the property gone. So what difference does it make that Koya and I had already worked out this arrangement 10 days before or the day of? Now, the question is, who goes to the settlement? Normally, what I would do is I would go to the settlement. Okay, and then Koya, who's the one who's writing me the check, would come to the settlement, obviously. Okay, and then sometimes the seller shows up, sometimes they don't. If it's a bank, they never show up. But if it's an estate sale, that kind of stuff. And I can tell you, I had one time, one woman actually asked me this question. And in fact, I think wasn't that ours? Yeah, it was our settlement. We did a deal together in Seabrook. Ray and I did a deal together in Seabrook. And it was the funniest thing because we did our analysis and we put in a certain price. It was an estate sale. And at the settlement, the lady's looking at me and she's looking at Ray. She said, who's this? And I said, that's my partner, right? And then after we signed off on all the paperwork, she said something that just blew me away. She said, I just want to know, how did you know the number? I said, what are you talking about? She said, the number that you got was exactly the number that the appraisal came in at for this property. I don't know. I don't know. And then she really got bent out of shape. You remember that? When the checks got distributed. And the agent got her check, and the seller got her check, and then Debbie handed me my check, and she looking at me like, and then Debbie handed me a check so everybody can see the number. I was like, oh, Debbie, why are you doing that? Debbie's the settlement attorney. And I think my fee was 4 times greater than the real estate agent's fee, or 2 times or something like that. And I asked that question. I'm going to ask the question again. I said, at the end of that settlement, I said, Ray, were you happy with the deal? Ray, are you happy with that deal? Okay. and ladies and gentlemen, if you ever decide you want to do wholesaling, that's what was that, 3 years ago? Yeah. You always want to be able to look one of your customers in the eye and say, were you happy with the deal? Yeah. You don't want to be, you don't want to be like, can I go down this back alleyway? Because one of them guys I wholesaled a deal to. Now, here's the funny thing about this particular deal, and then I'm going to wrap up. Are you guys getting good stuff out of this? Yeah. Okay. In this particular case, we went through all that, and I should have known I was in trouble because the person who was buying my interest calls me up. I had lined everything up, introduced her to the lender, and the person says, I don't think I can close when we're supposed to close. I said, okay. Okay, what do you need to do? I think I need another week. So we had to go back to the seller and do an addendum. And I had to call Charlie up and said, Charlie, I need another, and I didn't tell him another week. I said 2 weeks, right? Somebody says I need a week. That doesn't really mean you need a week. Unless it's a contractor. If a contractor says I need a week, what he's saying is I need a month. So I called Charlie up and I said, Charlie, I need 2 weeks. So we pushed out the settlement, but he said, tell you what, you're going to give me another $1,000, and if you don't settle at the prescribed date, we get to keep the $2,000. So I had to stroke another check for $1,000. Where do you think I got that from? You got that right. I went back to the buyer and said, okay, you gotta give me another check. Time came to go to settlement, and she calls me up 2 days before settlement, and she says, Sherman, we have a problem. I said, oh, yeah? What problem do we have? I said, I lined up the hard money loan for you. I lined up the contractor for you. I got the guy to agree to extend the settlement. What problem do we have? The hard money lender wants my husband to sign on the paperwork. And I don't mean this is not meant to be pejorative against women, okay? It could have easily been a man called me and said, my wife won't sign, okay? Bottom line was the two were not in sync. And the hard money lender's rules were, I'll fund anything you want, I'll fund as much as you want within reason, but both people are signing on the bottom line. And that was non-negotiable. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, let me call him and see what I can do. So I called Rex up. I said, Rex, and I didn't know, I think Rex knew me only over the telephone, and this was probably the second transaction I'd done with him. I said, Rex, I understand that you are, you're not willing to fund the deal. He says, no, that's not true. He says, I want both of them to sign. I said, well, Rex, is there any way that you could just have her sign? He said, Sherman, if her husband won't trust her with the money, why should I? And I was like, Rex, that's a good one, Rex. So ladies and gentlemen and ladies, if you're going to do this and you're married, make sure you have this conversation with your spouse before you're supposed to go to settlement, and understand that if both of you got to sign, work it out. And quite honestly, if I was doing the deal and I had gotten to a point where my wife was not willing to sign, this is definitely a deal I would have wholesaled. I'm not going to get into an argument with my spouse because they're not quite ready, and the lender says, this is a perfect example as to why you might want to wholesale a deal, okay? And again, it has nothing to do with the fact that she was a woman. It has everything to do with the fact her husband was a man, I think. But the deal certainly could have gone down either way. But here's the great thing about it, though. So 3 days before settlement, I'm sitting there going, I'm supposed to have a $7,500 because I ain't got no money coming in because my business just got wiped out last month. And I turned to my wife, God bless her soul, and I said, even though she's not in the room, but she'll be back shortly. I said, honey, I think this is a good deal. This was going to be our first full-fledged rehab. We had bought one house before, rehab to put a tenant in it. This was going to be a full-fledged rehab itself. I said, I want to do this deal. She said, fine, I'll sign. Let's go. So I call Rex back up. Okay, Rex, I'll take the deal. Notice, you guys have done HUD 1s, right? You know what a HUD 1 looks like? How much money did we have to come to the settlement table with? That is not a typo. Why? Number one, if you buy right, and everything that Rob is teaching you, if you put it in play, if you don't do more than 70% ARV, you will buy right. Number two, the other reason why this deal worked was because I had $2,000 of this woman's money. And she said to me, well, technically it wasn't. She said to me, she actually called me up and said, well, what did Rex say? I said, well, Rex said he's not going to do the deal, but he said he would do the deal with me, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do it. Oh, okay, that's cool. Well, can I have my money back? And a part of me wanted to laugh in her face, but that's really not who I am. So I said to her, I tell you what, I will give you the money back. Yeah. I said, but you're not going to. No, I did. I did because, it was my money. But I said, I'll give it. But I said, you're not going to get it back until after I sell the house. I said, I'll give it back to you, but you're not going to get it back till I sell the house. Now. And then I went on and said, but if you're willing to take $500, you can come get it tomorrow. No. No, so I did give her money back. Part of it is, at the end of the day, it's your reputation that's everything. And everybody's going to decide how they want to be viewed in this business. And I wanted to be viewed as a good guy. So I made a business decision, said, yes, I will give you your money, but you're not getting it back to the house sales. So we went to come on, I'm going to the settlement table and buying a house for $94.22. I mean, that's as close to nothing now. I think I could have put that on my credit card. That's as close to nothing down as you're going to get. And so we bought the house, and we rehabbed it. Rex was the hard money guy on that one. Oh, and then we sold it. When did we go to settlement? What's the date on there? October 12th, 2001. And everything that could go wrong did go wrong. My contractor took 6 months to rehab a house. It should have taken him 6 weeks. It cost more than we thought it was going to cost. However, the market did go up. Can anybody tell what that says? Okay. What it says, what did I think I was going to sell that house for? 75. What did I sell it for? 105. So I sold it for $30,000 more than I thought. And when you go through and you do all this stuff, you see what I made. No, that's not correct, because that's the buyer. This is the seller. So what did I make? We made $47,000. Now you got to take $2,000 off, right? Because I did give it back. So I made 40. I mean, huh? Yeah, but the rehab costs were in the loan draws. So this was really my money. Yeah, this was net. So I made $45,000 on a $94.22 investment. Now I'm not real good at math. But this is the reason why I show this one to you as an example. I want you guys to see the interrelationship between rehabbing and wholesaling. Okay? A really good wholesale deal should be a win-win. Win-win for everybody. This would have been an absolute home run for this woman if she had been able to go forward with the deal. Okay? And because it wound up coming back to me as the wholesaler, it was a win-win for me and my wife. If I had just simply taken some really garbage deal and shoved it down the pipeline and picked up a quick $2,000 and it was a bad deal, these numbers would not have looked like this. So wholesaling is not an exit strategy for a bad deal. Okay? If it's a bad deal, just leave it alone. If it's a bad deal, leave it on the sidewalk in the gutter where it belongs. But if it's a good deal, there may be logical business reasons to wholesale rather than doing the rehab.
Did you show that to her husband?
No, but I showed it to her when I gave it. Okay, so it took 6 months to rehab and it took another 30 days to sell it. I mean, actually, once we put it on the market, it sold in like 15 days. Once we actually put it on the market, I mean, it was gone. I probably could have held out for 115 or 120, but you know what? At that point, I was like, hey, I'm looking at a $45,000 payday. I'm not gonna be greedy. Let's just go, go with it. Okay, so hopefully this will help understand when do you wholesale, when do you not wholesale, bring the context. Again, the main thing I would share with you is everything that Rob is teaching you about rehabbing fits in wholesaling. Wholesaling is just another potential exit strategy. You still got to do the homework, you still got to do your calculations, you still got to do your marketing and everything else. But if you get to the point where you go, hey, look, I think I'd just rather have the quick cash, okay, then you try to figure out a way you can structure a win-win for your buyer and wholesale it to another rehabber. All right? Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question about trust.
Trust.
Just like you said, you can go online and get download the forms to your LLC.
Yes.
Can you go online and down your trust?
That is a very good question, and the best answer I can give you, which is not legal advice, but is the best answer that I know, is you can do that. I would not do that. And the reason why is a trust is not an entity. A trust is a contract. Okay? An entity is something that is created by statute, and therefore the forms that you can download to the state of Maryland, the forms are the forms of the forms are all the same. But a trust is a contract. And there are certain things that are, and anytime you start talking about contracts, my suggestion is anytime you use a contract that you've never used before, you have an attorney review it to make sure it says what you think it says. Trusts in particular, because trusts tend to use ye olde English, and ye olde English does not necessarily mean what you think it means. You know, beneficiary, who's the beneficiary? Who's the trustee? You know, who's the testator? Huh? But the main thing is, again, entities are created by statute, meaning the Maryland legislature gets together and says, if you want to form an LLC in the state of Maryland, these are the 10 things you have to follow. And therefore, the form that you download has the 10 things you have to follow. And you just fill in the blank in the state of Maryland. You can't fill in the blank in D.C., but you can fill it in Maryland. A trust is a contract, meaning it can say whatever you and the other party to the contract want it to say. And there's a gazillion trusts floating around out there. That doesn't mean it's necessarily appropriate for you to use without having a competent attorney review it. Yes, sir.
When you sell the LLC to the buyer,
yes,
can they dissolve that LLC, or how does that?
They can if they want to, or they can keep it in place. The only thing that they would need to do if they decide to keep it in place is do a change of the resident agent. And that's usually, in my particular case, when I do a settlement, the title company will usually take care of that for me because they want to make sure that the correct resident agent on a going forward basis is on the paperwork in case they have to get in touch with somebody. So, but other than that, if they can keep it, they can dissolve it, put it into a trust, do whatever they want with it. Understand this, in Maryland, your annual fee is like $300. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to form an LLC because the annual fee is $300. Guess what? If you're wholesaling a deal, how long are you going to own that LLC? Maybe 60 days. So the annual fee becomes somebody else's issue, not yours. And if they choose to dissolve it for that reason, more power to them. But again, what does an LLC represent? A clean glass. What does a trust represent? A coconut cup. And if you got people who love water and coconut cups, then fine, do coconut cups. But in this marketplace, most people understand what an LLC is. You don't have to explain it to them. Trust, on the other hand, well, who formed your trust? What lawyer drafted the document? Let me see the document. What does this mean? Well, I don't know what it means because, I don't know what it means myself. I didn't talk to a lawyer about it. I downloaded it off some website. Don't go there. You don't need to. Last question. Yes, sir.
If you work in a wholesale, you put it in an LLC.
Yes.
And you decide to rehab it instead.
Yes.
What's the relationship between that LLC and your general operating business?
Whatever you want it to do.
So
And that's the beautiful part about an LLC.
transfer the ownership or
It's whatever you want it to be. And that's the beautiful. And I'm not being facetious. The great thing about an LLC is you have two pieces of paper that govern the LLC. You have the Articles of Organization, and then you have the operating agreement. The operating agreement does not get recorded in the state of Maryland. So you can change that at any time you want. Now, where the cement dries is an LLC is what's called a pass-through entity. And so at a certain point in time in the future, you will have to file a tax return with the IRS. It'll either be a K-1 or 1099 or some other, just depending on how you classify. Once you do that, the concrete is set. You can change it. In other words, I start off and I think I'm going to wholesale this deal to Yoko, okay? And we get to the point where the deal falls apart. Now I'm keeping it. All of that back and forth never really gets recorded anywhere, okay? I have an operating agreement, now we change it. Okay, fine, no big deal. But at the point in time where you actually start to file tax returns, then the cement is dried. You can certainly come back and change it. Like you file your tax return and you own 100%, and the next year you decide that you're going to bring in a partner. Well, the next year you would modify you would do a different filing with the IRS, and again, it's going to be dependent upon what your structure is. An LLC for tax purposes can look like a corporation, in which case it files documents that are similar to a corporation, or an LLC can look like a partnership, in which case it would file tax documents similar to what a partnership would file.
But just leave it as it is, like, business account.
Oh yeah. And what I would suggest is that, if you're just simply buying, rehabbing, and reselling, you just do it all through one LLC. And your operating business can be like the 1% managing partner, and you personally could be the 99% limited partner, or your IRA could be the 9. And that's the great thing about LLCs is you've got that kind of flexibility. How do you make that ultimate decision? You sit down and you talk to your spouse if you're married and say, what are we doing with this deal? Okay, or get some direction, okay, if they're involved in the business. And then you sit down and talk to your legal, your competent counsel, which should be your CPA and your lawyer, and do the documentation properly. But again, the good news about an LLC is you have at least a year to kind of figure that out in most cases. Because you can say, okay, my tax year for my LLC is going to be not a calendar year, but a fiscal year. So if I start the LLC in October, I'm not going to file taxes till next October. And you buy yourself some time to kind of figure all that stuff out. Corporations, that's not true. Corporations, you have to kind of file certain paperwork right up front and kind of figure that stuff out day one. And then it's a whole lot of rigmarole. When they talk about corporate formalities, there's a whole lot of documents you have to file at the state level to change anything. LLCs, that's not true. LLC, you file an operating agreement. You guys have seen the the Articles of Organization. You guys have seen the Articles of Organization. It's a one-page fill in the blank. And then your operating agreement can be whatever you want it to be. And I would sit down with a lawyer and kind of figure that out once you kind of figure out what your business looks like. Okay? All right, last question. I understand that I'm standing between you and dinner. I'm going with you.